All right, guys, welcome back to part 4 of the 10-part Intro to Java Programming tutorial series. I just want to take a second to congratulate all of those who made it this far. If you're enjoying this video, please go ahead and give it a like. And if you have any comments or suggestions, please leave them down below. But just getting back to it, in the previous video, we discussed variables. And in this video, we're going to be talking a little bit more about methods. So in this, we're going to start by creating a class, and we can do that by going over here to the source directory. We're going to right click here, go to new, and we're going to create a Java class. So we're going to call this one a calculator. So we just created a class, and just going back to what we discussed about classes, and we'll definitely have a full tutorial on classes itself. We will define a class, and the class essentially holds all the variables and methods for our particular program. So we call this class calculator, and the reason why we're doing that is because we want to contain all of the methods and variables for a calculator in its own class. That way it's nicely separated from the rest of the code that we're going to write. So we're creating this calculator, and the first thing we are going to do is create the methods. So first, I'm just going to go ahead and zoom in on this for you guys. Just give me 1 second. All right, this should be much easier to see. Thanks, Nick, for the suggestion here. So we're going to start off by writing a few methods for our calculator. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to write a method called add. So instead of writing all the logic in our previous class and having it all within one method, let's separate it out into something nicely segregated. So let's go ahead and start by typing in public, and we're going to write int. So I'll explain this in a few, then add, and then within that we will take an int a and an int b. So, and then we'll create curly braces, and that should be the method definition. So here we have a class calculator, and we've created the method add. So here we're saying this is a public method of the calculator, and I want it to return, and we'll talk about what a return statement is. I want it to return an int, and essentially we're creating the method called add. And within these parentheses, we're saying take an integer a and an integer b. We're going to manipulate it within this method, and then we're going to return the result. So we can start by saying within our method return a plus b, and that completes the method definition. So again, we have our calculator, and now we have a method that we defined that returns the addition or the sum of a plus b. So this return statement is essentially what Java will look for to know what it needs to give back from this method. So we're saying that we're telling it here, hey, I'm going to return an integer from this add method, and I need to take in these two numbers, a and b. I'm going to do something with them, and then I'm just going to return that result. So now we can say, let's create we'll also return an int. Let's create a subtract method. So this is saying, again, we're going to return an int, and we're saying this is the name of the method. And then within that, these are called arguments or parameters. You'll hear them used interchangeably. And we're going to take two numbers, int a and int b, and we're going to do something with them within this method. And we will like to return a minus b. So if you want to, you can also do something like the following, where we say int sum is equal to a minus b, and then return sum. So it's really up to you how you want to define that. It looks like IntelliJ is giving us a little light bulb here and says, let's see what this says here. We'll hover over it. It says local variable sum is redundant. So it's essentially just telling us why write this out when we could just have a minus b here. So we'll just go ahead and clean that up. So far we've written two methods here. We've written the add method, subtract. So what else can we have a calculator do? Well, we can have it multiply. We can also have it divide. So we're going to just write those methods as well. We'll say public int multiply int a and int b. So again, these are our arguments, and we'll say return a times b. And we can say divide as well. Int divide int a int b. And we will return a divided by b. So these, again, are operators. So we're just saying manipulate this integer with this operator here. These are our arguments, which we have defined as a and b for each of the methods that we created. And essentially, we created 4 methods that we can call from our program. So I'm going to very quickly get out of presentation mode. And we will take a look at this hello world, back to our hello world class that we had before, which was the main class that we created previously with the main method. So you took a look at that class before, and essentially we just created these 4 methods. We can also create them within our hello world program. So we're going to go ahead and do the same thing in here. So we're just going to write them back out. So we're going to just say public static, and don't worry too much about why this is static just yet. Just know that if we say that this main method is static, then we'll have to write static for all the other methods if this method is calling it. So for now, we'll just say public static, and we'll say int since it's going to return an int, and then we'll say add, and we will say the same thing we did before. We'll do int a and int b. And the reason why we're just rewriting it here is just for easier access. We do have another tutorial that's fully on classes, and I'll show you exactly how to use these classes that we created and go into a better explanation of it. But just sticking to the method tutorial, we'll just stick it back into this Hello World class. So here we did some addition stuff, and now we're just going to, instead of doing it within the main method, we're just going to create a separate method to do addition. That way it's nicely organized. So you can see kind of the benefit of having classes and having methods. You can have a super gigantic main method that does everything, but why when we could just kind of clean it up? So I'll show you how we rewrite this afterwards. So we have our public static, and then now we have this method will return an int, add int a and int b. These are just our arguments or our parameters. And we will say return a plus b. Feel free to copy and paste if you want to. I'm just going to write them out. That way we get some more practice. Int subtract, and then we'll say int a, int b. Return a minus b, and then we'll do the same for multiply, and we'll do the same for divide. So remember, feel free to copy and paste. And B, there we go. So we have now 4 methods within our Hello World class. And these 4 methods are add, subtract, multiply, divide. So now we can call this, we can reuse these and do as many additions, multiplications, subtractions as we want without having to type it out like this. So imagine we say something like int sum 2 here, and we say do something like 10 plus 5, and then we repeat that sum 3, and the list could go on and on here. So we could say 20 plus 7, and this could become redundant. And then here we'll say, okay, now print out our sum 2, and now we're sum 3. Let's just remove these, sorry about that. And our sum 3. Now this could become redundant since we're kind of going through the same thing here and here and here. One of the things that we can do since we define these is we can just call the method and just say, hey, I want to manipulate these numbers. I want to add them, subtract them, multiply them, and divide them. And then I want to print the result for each. So here we will just go to the last line of our main method, and we're just going to print out the result of each one. So we'll define some new variables. We'll call them A and B, and we'll say int A equals 20 and int B equals 100. And let's go ahead and just do what we can with these numbers. And actually, I'll make this 100 and then 20. Just because of the division, we're going to divide A and B. So I want that to be nice and clean. So we're going to say, let's print out system.out.println. And we will say add A and B. So this will print the result of A plus B. So it's just going to add 120. And we should get a result that's equal to 120. So here we'll just say 120. That way we know what our result will be. And for now, we're just going to we're going to comment out or just remove the code up here. So a comment in Java essentially is just something like this, where it's just some notes that you can take. You can also just delete the code if you want. To comment out, you could just press Command and then slash, and that will just create a comment block out of it. So this is something that the compiler and the Java, the compiler won't even run this when you run your code. So we're going to go ahead and just repeat the same system out println statements that we have here. And we are going to say, let's do system.out.println, and we're going to subtract these numbers now. So we'll subtract, and we'll subtract A and B. And one thing to note is that you don't necessarily have to call these, whoops, I commented this out. So I'll just press Command slash again. So you don't necessarily have to call these A and B. Remember, we could call this like 120 if we wanted to. So there's no need to call it A and B. I just wanted to use those for simplicity, but just so you know that you're not limited to just using what you call the parameter. So hopefully that makes sense. So we can change this as well to, we'll call it, I guess, num1 and this one num2. And we'll call this num1, and then we'll do the same with num2. And again, it doesn't really matter, since as long as we keep these individual blocks contained, it's okay to change the names of the arguments that we're using. So again, these are arguments or parameters. So now we will say, okay, 100 minus 20. So we're doing A minus B in this method. And this subtract is doing 100 minus 20 is 80. So we should expect to see 80. And again, this is a comment. I should have mentioned that before, but essentially, yeah, double slash will make it a comment, and it won't be run by the JVM or the Java virtual machine. So we'll go ahead and create the next print statement here, and we'll call this one multiply. And this one will do the 100 times 20. And this should be 2000. So this is just doing 2 times or 20 times 100, which should be 2000. And finally, we will do the division. So we're going to print this out and say divide. And we'll do divide 100 by 20. And again, let's take a look at what we said here. So we said divide our A, or the first argument, divide that by B. So we're dividing 100 by 20, which we defined as 20 and 20. And int B will be the 20. And that should be 5. So we should, when we run this program, since we commented all these lines out, we should not see any output for these definitions here. We should also see 4 print statements, and we should see 120, 80, 2000, and 5. So one thing I will do is I will add another statement down here. And this one will be just another print statement. And I'll say add 500 and 500. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I want you to understand that these methods are reusable. So we can reuse them as many times as we want. We don't necessarily have to keep typing out this plus and this minus. And it makes the code super easy to read, since we know, hey, I'm going to add this number and this number. I'm going to subtract this number and this number. I'm going to multiply this number and this number. I'm going to divide this number and this number. And again, now we can say, hey, I'm going to add another 2 numbers and I should get a result. Whereas up here, we were repeating the same statements and the code just starts to get really, really messy and it's hard for others to understand. So now we're going to go ahead and run this, and we will just exit this. So let's give me 1 second to exit from presentation mode, and we will open up our terminal. This should just be Java C or Java compile hello world.java. And now this should create the new class file, the new machine code. And now we can say, hey, Java, run my program and give me the results. So we'll go ahead and say Java and then the name of the program. And then here we should see the output of each of these. So we said we would get for the addition 120, subtraction 80, multiply 2000, and the divide, we should get 5. And then finally, this last line, which is this one here, we're just adding 500 and 500, and we're getting 1000. All right, so that kind of explains what these methods are. And we did create this calculator class with the same methods, but we'll come back to this one in a future tutorial, since we're going to get into classes and talk about different libraries and different code modules that are included in Java. That way we don't have to keep rewriting the same code. And that is it for methods. If you guys have any questions, any comments, any suggestions, please leave them down below. In the next video, we're going to be talking a little bit about loops. We're going to talk about that. And thanks everyone for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.